All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome back to another episode of the Nom de Guerre podcast. Well, it is getting spicy again between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Just yesterday, February 21st, looks like some Pakistani jet fighters flew into Afghanistan and took out 7 different camps belonging to the terrorist group called Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, calling it, quote, intelligence-based selective retaliation, and claimed to have wiped out between 70 and 80 of these TTP terrorists, and also some top members of the terrorist group ISIS Khorasan while they were at it. Now, the retaliation in question here is for a series of suicide bombings that are carried out by the TTP in Pakistan, including very recently a suicide bombing attack on a mosque, a Shia Mosque, on February 6th in Islamabad that ended up killing about 32 people. Before that, of course, there have been a number of similar prominent attacks. There was one in Bajar that killed 11 soldiers and a child, and there was also an ambush on a Pakistani convoy in Banu by this TTP terrorist organization. Let's flip over to Kabul, and the Taliban government is screaming bloody frickin' murder over there. They say the bombs from Pakistan landed on civilians, a madrasa, and even a school in the Guerre village. 17 to 18 dead, including women and children, they claim, and dozens more are wounded or still missing after these Pakistani airstrikes. Zabihul Mujahid had already put out a statement, quote, "They bombed our civilian compatriots. We will give a calculated and appropriate response at the right time." So now, what makes this conflict especially interesting here is that this isn't just some random Tuesday border spat. This is two groups that used to basically be the same team that are now shooting and bombing each other like it's the Hatfields and McCoys, with medieval religious fanatics on one side and medieval religious fanatics with nuclear weapons on the other side. Now, there is a little bit of clarification I think is necessary with some of these terms and some of these organizations. Now, when most people hear the Taliban, they think of it as one sort of monolithic organization, which is not quite the case. There is the Afghan Taliban, which is the Islamic terrorist organization of the Deobandi sect, that has been running Kabul ever since Joe Biden basically handed that country to them in 2021. And then there is the TTP, the Islamist terrorist organization of the Deobandi sect, that basically wants to take over Pakistan and establish hardcore Sharia law in that country. Yeah, I know, when I heard that, I also thought, what do you mean by establish Sharia law in Pakistan? Aren't things already pretty jihad-y there? I mean, Pakistan is already an Islamic republic, so it makes you wonder just how different things would actually be in Pakistan under hardcore Sharia law. You already get sentenced to death in Pakistan if you insult the Prophet Muhammad. You get 80 lashes for drinking alcohol, and being gay is a criminal act there. In fact, they still sentence women to death by stoning for the crimes of fornication and adultery. And while it is true that they rarely ever dish out punishments like that, they almost never execute anyone by stoning these days. Oftentimes, what you'll get is they don't even need to do that, because a lot of the time these Islamist street mobs will often carry out their own violent vigilante justice and basically just do it themselves. I mean, if I didn't know any better, I'd say that all of that basically sounds like Sharia law to me as is. So the fact that there are groups out there who basically think that Pakistan isn't hardline and extreme enough to the extent that they're willing to send fighters to blow themselves up for the cause of taking control of Pakistan, again, a hardline fundamentalist Islamic country ruled by the doctrines of 7th century Arabia, into their own vision for the country, which is a hardline fundamental Islamic country ruled by the doctrines of 7th century Arabia. So, yeah, the TTP isn't some distant cousin of the Afghan Taliban. In fact, they're basically like blood brothers. And ever since President Biden basically handed them that country on a silver platter in 2021, along with billions of dollars of American military equipment to go along with it, TTP attacks inside of Pakistan have gone completely freaking nuts. There are literally hundreds of them every year now, and just last year, in 2025 alone, there's been more than 1,000 people killed in these attacks. And these TTP guys are launching these raids from Afghan soil, basically like it's their personal backyard military base. And so in response, Pakistan has been begging Kabul, or, the Taliban, to do something. And predictably, Kabul's response was basically, yeah, sorry, not our problem, man. And what they actually said was, yeah, sorry, not our problem. We actually kind of like what they're doing over there, so, yep, sorry, bro, not gonna make them stop. And so then Pakistan, of course, finally said, screw it, and sent in jets yet again. And now this is especially important because South Asia is basically a powder keg with 2 nuclear states, India and Pakistan. It's got broke economies, and it's full of enough angry young men with beards and a 7th century war doctrine as their religion to keep this conflict and bloodshed going on for the next decades. One wrong move here, and we're not talking about border skirmishes in the mountains and in these tribal areas anymore. We're talking real chaos that will spill all over the region. So now here's the part that is extra ironic when it comes to Pakistan and their relationship with the Taliban. So for decades, since the 1990s, Pakistan's government spy agency, the ISI, which is basically their equivalent of the CIA, they didn't just support the Afghan Taliban, they straight up built that entire organization, all by themselves, essentially. So back in the 90s, the ISI trained them, they armed them, they gave them money, they gave them safe houses, the whole entire 9 yards. And why did they do that? It's because they wanted a friendly government of jihadists in Kabul that would really hate India as much as they do. Strategic depth is what they called it. But yeah, real genius move there, Pakistan. Nice going. So when the Taliban ruled into Kabul in 1996 and started chopping hands off and stuffing women into freaking burqas, Pakistan was one of only 3 countries that basically said, yep, yeah, that's fine, totally legit, that's cool, no problems there. And then, a few years later, 9/11 happens, and Osama bin Laden is just basically chilling there in that region in Pakistan. So what does Pakistan do? Well, publicly, they are America's best buddies in the region, and they're taking in billions and billions of dollars of U.S. taxpayer-funded aid. But privately, they have been letting the Taliban leadership just hang out in their backyard in Pakistan like it is a frickin' vacation rental. Bin Laden himself ended up in Abbottabad, right down the street from their frickin' military academy. What a coincidence. So then when the U.S. finally bails from Afghanistan in 2021 and the Afghan government collapses in like 11 seconds, what was the reaction in Islamabad and across Pakistan for that matter? Parties. Actual straight up celebration. Our boys won. Strategic depth achieved. In fact, let me just show you some of the videos of these celebrations when that happened there. Look at this. This is a video of some students in Pakistan, and they are singing a song called Salam Taliban in an event celebrating the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan here. You can see they are surrounded by ring wraiths. There's a lot more than 9 of them. No, these are women in burqas, and behind them you can see a small child there too. and they are waving the flag of the Taliban. Here's another example. This is another example on X, and it's a convoy here driving by. This is inside of Pakistan's Quetta region. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. But there are huge convoys all waving the Taliban flag there. And you can faintly hear that music in the background, which is basically, praise for the Taliban. I'm going to show you one more clip here. This is in the Hindustan Times. And you can see these celebrations on the streets. They're handing out sweets and candy to children, and they are celebrating the reestablishment of the Taliban in Afghanistan. This is in Pakistan, just over the border. People are driving around with the Taliban flag. So yeah, people were really happy in Pakistan that all of this ended up happening. They thought basically that they hit the freaking jackpot here. They thought they had a friendly Taliban government right next door with no Indian influence. And hey, maybe the TTP problem might just magically disappear is, what they were kind of hoping. And ladies and gentlemen, that delusion lasted for all of about 3 weeks. Before long, TTP leaders started posting victory videos from Afghanistan going, they were basically like, look what our brothers did, and now it's our turn to do this to Pakistan. And just like that, attacks go off, suicide bombings, shootings, all over these cities. And then the TTP's Amir, Noor Wali Mashood, who's basically operating in the open now, just over the border inside of Afghanistan, he put out this one-page statement here. He is describing the Taliban's defeat of the US-backed Afghan government as, quote, a victory for the entire Muslim Ummah, which refers to basically the global Muslim community around the world. And then he adds that, quote, the future of the entire Islamic Ummah depends on it. He then goes on to pledge that his men will, quote, not spare any sacrifice for the stability and development of the restored emirate. And then he talks about his ambitions to basically do the same thing to Pakistan. And so Pakistan, at this point, is basically like, hey, cousins, can you do anything to rein your boys in here? And the Afghan Taliban's answer is basically, LOL, no. We don't control every valley here. Although, while somehow controlling enough to be able to ban music and girls' education nationwide, but, I digress. All I can say is that this is what happens when you spend 30 years raising vicious, unhinged attack dogs, and then one day you're suddenly shocked that they decide to bite your hand off. And so by 2022, the mask was completely gone here. The TTP ended their ceasefire and went full jihad mode against Pakistan. By this point, the TTP now has some 30,000 plus fighters all hanging out along the Afghan-Pakistani border. So Pakistan tried basically everything. Begging, threats, small strikes in 2022 and 2024. And then, in October 2025, they went all in with their Operation Khyber Storm. This operation hit targets in Kabul itself in a campaign aimed at taking out the TTP leader. There was ground fighting at Spinboldak. Dozens of people were killed, and overall, it was just a huge freaking mess. In the end, it finally took Qatar and Turkey to drag everybody into ceasefire. And that ceasefire, ladies and gentlemen, held for 4 whole months. For 4 freaking months. Then the mosque bombing, the convoy hits, and boom, here we are again. Pakistan went from, hell yeah, these are our guys, to "we will bomb your villages if you don't control your freaking cousins." Now, that isn't a relationship cooling off. That is a full toxic breakup, but with added airstrikes in the mix. So let's zoom out here because this mess doesn't just stay in the mountains. For Pakistan, their economy is already circling the drain. They've got debt, inflation, political drama nonstop. And now their army is fighting the TTP inside of their country and launching cross-border raids into Afghanistan. For them, every strike risks pulling regular Afghan Taliban troops into the fight. They're also kicking out hundreds of thousands of Afghan refugees, which is creating its own humanitarian nightmare. And oh yeah, they also owe China a ton of freaking money for all of those CPEC roads and ports that the TTP keeps blowing up, which is also not ideal for them. For the Taliban in Kabul, this makes them look weak as hell. They can't even stop their own ideological buddies from getting themselves blown up by Pakistan. And if they crack down hard on the TTP, they risk splitting their own movement. And, you know, these Haqqani guys and these movements really have deep ties with one another. And so if they do nothing at all, then they just look flat out pathetic, which they don't want that either. So no recognition from the world. Their economy is in the toilet. Women are treated like furniture, basically. And now they've got this to deal with. Their Islamic Emirate here is starting to look like a bad joke, just with excellent propaganda. But of course, personally, that's always what I have thought of the state of Pakistan as, considering it's basically a made-up state, barely held together by thoughts and prayers at this point, and the fact that it's a nuclear state. But I digress, that's a video for another day. For the Chinese, well, Beijing is sweating bullets at this point. They've already dumped tens of billions of dollars into Pakistan, hoping that this Belt Road initiative of theirs will, get off the ground and be successful. And to make things worse, TTP has already killed a bunch of Chinese workers in these skirmishes. And so, if Pakistan keeps getting hit here, those Belt and Road dreams will basically turn into explosive parking lots for burned out trucks. And so, China wants this to quiet down like yesterday. So they will probably pressure both sides behind closed doors. But yeah, they do not want another forever war on their doorstep. For India, Delhi is probably, cracking a quiet smile at this point. Pakistan is distracted on the west, which means fewer headaches for them in the Jammu-Kashmir disputes. But even India knows that a full meltdown next door will bring waves and waves of refugees, which in turn will lead to more Islamist radicalization. And then there's the nightmare of a nuclear Pakistan fighting on two fronts at once, again, right next door, which is also not exactly a huge win for them. Even Bangladesh will feel the results and will feel the effects of all of this. If you'll remember, their own Islamist drama in 2024, following the ouster of the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and then more recently, Islamist groups like Jamaat-e-Islami in Bangladesh, despite losing by a landslide in the recent elections this month, are probably watching this all on social media in Bengali and in Urdu going, "See, look at this, jihad still works, there's still a fighting chance for us." A long, messy war here will also likely inspire many other copycat terrorist attacks by Islamists across South Asia and, in Bangladesh. And plus, any big refugee mess hits the region like dominoes. And as you all know, extremism doesn't do passports here. So the bottom line, Pakistan helped create a monster thinking that it would only eat the neighbors. And now the monster is sitting here at the dinner table, and Pakistan is the main course about to be devoured up by its own sick creation. So what happens next? Another Doha ceasefire that lasts until the next bomb in about 5 minutes? Full escalation? Does China finally step in and smack everybody? I don't know. I don't have the answer to any of that, but history says that when you play around with suicide bombs, they will very often blow up in your face, quite literally. Thanks for hanging with me through all that. Please feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this strike was justified? Will the Taliban actually hit back hard? And who do you think is the biggest idiot in this whole saga? As always, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video. Stay sane out there, ladies and gentlemen. The real world is messy, but it is still, in fact, the real world.